In the early 19th century, the American Hemisphere was brimming with great aspiration. Between 1811 and 1822, 8 newly independent nations emerged in Latin America, including Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Venezuela, Paraguay, Chile, and Peru, all formerly under Spain, and Brazil, which had belonged to Portugal. By defeating the British Empire in the War of 1812, the United States of America had won their second war for independence. Across the Atlantic, independence was not on the minds of the old empires of Europe. Their intent to restore the old imperial order and possibly reach into the New World were a matter of profound concern in Washington. Into this charged atmosphere, the Monroe Doctrine was born. It would shape American foreign policy for the next 2 centuries. In the early 1800s, the Spanish Empire was crumbling. One by one, its former colonies in the Americas declared their independence. As Latin American countries threw off the yoke of imperial rule, it was largely celebrated in the United States as a victory for Republican ideals. Yet, a disquieting undercurrent began to flow from the Old World. A league of European monarchies in Russia, Prussia, Austria, and France was rumored to be contemplating intervention in these new American republics. In the wake of Napoleon's demise, a Bourbon king, Louis XVIII, ruled France. His distant cousin, Ferdinand VII, ruled Spain. In 1820, a military uprising in Spain ushered in a liberal government whose reign was called the Trienio Liberal, the 3 liberal years. In 1823, France deployed forces known as the 100,000 Sons of Louis, to suppress the liberal government and restore King Ferdinand's absolute power. 2 years earlier, and much closer to America, the Russians, under Tsar Alexander I, prohibited ships from approaching within 100 miles of what is now the Alaskan shoreline. The United States and Great Britain had competing claims on the Oregon Territory. U.S. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams interpreted the old European empires as a potential threat to the independence of the Western Hemisphere. President Monroe agreed. It was in the annual message to Congress that Monroe addressed the matter. On December 2, 1823, he articulated what came to be known as the Monroe Doctrine. The message contained 2 core tenets. First, that the American continents were no longer open to European colonization. And second, that the United States would not interfere in the internal affairs of European nations or their existing colonies. The Monroe Doctrine was a declaration of hemispheric independence, a bold assertion of American influence, and a warning to the Old World to keep its hands off the New. Several times in the 1840s, President James K. Polk invoked the Monroe Doctrine toward American expansion. Most importantly, he warned Great Britain not to attempt colonization in the Oregon Territory. He further warned European powers not to interfere in the Mexican-American conflict over Texas. Under his administration, the United States annexed Oregon and Texas. On December 6, 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt established a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, the right of the United States to intervene in order to stabilize the economies of small states in the Caribbean and Central America. The adherence of the United States to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, in flagrant cases of such wrongdoing or impotence, to the exercise of an international police power. In 1905, the Dominican Republic was in massive debt to France, Germany, and Italy. An agreement was struck with the United States whereby the Dominican Republic went into receivership. In other words, it consented to American management of its debt by allowing it to take over its collection of customs. In 1912, President Taft deployed forces to Nicaragua for a 3rd time, this one in order to stabilize the country and ensure a regime there that favored commerce with America. His intervention was part of his broader foreign policy efforts called dollar diplomacy. In 1915, President Wilson sent the Marines to restore order in Haiti after the Haitian president was assassinated. The United States occupied Haiti until 1934. In 1962, President Kennedy decried Russia's presence in Cuba and declared that any missile launched from there against any nation in the Western Hemisphere would require a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. By intervening as he did, Kennedy averted no less than the outbreak of a nuclear war. The Castro regime stayed in power, however, and Cuba remained communist, an ally to the Soviets and a fomenter of revolution in the Americas. Twice in the 1980s, America countered Cuban-backed regimes in the Hemisphere. From 1981 through 1986, the Reagan administration backed the Contras against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. On October 25, 1983, America invaded Grenada and liberated the island nation from the Marxist regime there. Today, the Sandinistas, having lost a national election in 1990, are back in power in Nicaragua. Grenada remains a free and independent nation.